Welcome to Black Lodge Publishing, the home of esoterica and the occult. We hope you enjoy the following lectures on YouTube. Welcome to Black Lodge Publishing and our second presentation, an introduction to the Egyptian Duat. We shall begin by asking ourselves the question, what happens when a magical portal or gateway opens? The answer is that by a process of dislimbing, one can begin a journey through that of the liminal, and just like the doorway, we are led on and into the subconscious, which is glyphed as the Duatic netherworld, and where we can travel through At-Keki, the chamber of darkness, and tunnels of the Shetit, the beyond. Yet, there are many who see this as a process simply of transitioning from light to dark. Yet, I would also suggest that it implies more of an alchemical adaptation and transformation. For on the one hand, this is not only a change in visual perception, as in that which occurs with such as the change in light levels through our physiological and neurological processing mechanisms, and which, although this is in itself much to do with brain function, yet on the other hand, we should also acknowledge that of our capacity for noesis, and indeed our ability to project, adapt, and thus, as such, transit by way of meditation, magic, through that of intent focus. This is achieved by activating or willing the mind's eye to awaken. In Egyptian, this is primarily the function of the Ak, the mind, working in tandem with the Ba soul, and which we should further recognise as working in conjunction with the Kat, or the body. However, before a student practitioner recognised an Egyptian as Merek, one who seeks knowledge, can actually practice any magical techniques that are necessary for such as transitioning or dislimbing into At-Keki, the chamber of darkness, and then into the Shetit, the beyond, and where the practitioner should be aware that both At-Keki and the Shetit are recognised as limbs of the Duat, e.g. the netherworld. As Merek, students had to study and be taught in Perank, the house of life, by the Sonyu, the magician, initiate, healer, and above all else, a seer. On entry into Perank, the house of life, the student, Merek, had to undergo initiation, and where oaths were taken to Seshat and Thoth. Then basic scribal duties and magical instruction were given, including the writing and composition of magical prayers and spells, along with learning the meanings and how to use certain magical weapons, such as the serpent wand, the wasp scepter, and the net ibn, along with other weapons while scrying the night side. These are glyphed and manipulated as sentient symbols, e.g. sigils. Thus, only when the student practitioner is fully trained are they then allowed to enter At-Keki and the Shetit in order to scry. And then, and this is the interesting point, on returning, if successful, and recording their findings, the practitioner was finally tested by the Sonyu. See my Chamber of Darkness for more details. And if they passed, they themselves became Sonyu Acheri Seshet Per Duat, an initiate of the secrets in the Duat. Some have asked for evidence in the Egyptian texts as to the meditational part of Merek's training. Thus, the practitioner, magician, seer, in order to engage in scrying the Duat, certain magical techniques proved necessary, in which prepared them to be able to enter At-Keki and the Shetit whenever they willed. These techniques will be similar to those who practice the art, even although the glyphs and meanings used have a slightly different function to those of our modern magical training. Yet, as I have pointed out in my books, the general gist of the praxis can be discovered and used. On the slide, we see a short list of the most common, or at least recognisable practices used by the initiate magician, healer, seer, or Sonyu, and where the arrowglyph relates to the magic of the goddess Neith. for more information on this important goddess see my Chamber of Darkness. For as in good Ophidian magical tradition, we need the use of our focused will, res tep, and the ability to understand the conscious ras wet, or waking dream. These methods can then lead the Sonyu, the initiate, to more intensive scrying and eventually even to sir, prophecy. And yet firstly, one must learn how to invoke and then activate certain protective Neteru who will travel with your Akba on the Mehen serpent bark. These are Heka, magic, who activates the protective coiled veil around the practitioner, and Sia, percipience, hence at the front of the boat, and not shown on this particular Mehen, is Hu, the divine and magical voice to be used. Other useful Neteru can also be activated, such as Iri, who relates particular to vision, Sidjem, another protective serpent Neter. One word from him can sway an entire army. Questions one might ask at this stage: how does one enter through the individual gates or hours of the Duat? And what lies beyond each of these subconscious gates? For a much more succinct answer to these questions, we are told in the treatise of the Hidden Chamber that we will learn about the position and function of the Basils, the Neteru, the shadows, and the function of the Ak, and also what is done there. I think by now the listener will be aware that one soon learns that the Duat shares in the fusion of Osirian and Heliopolitan material. This indeed is a clue to the Egyptian understanding of cyclicity and on the unification as centred within Nuit as the cosmos rotates within her, or as we can relate our understanding of it through our dayside and nightside narratives. For this cyclicity is represented through Osiris, who is Lord of the Netherworld, and also Ra, who is Lord of Light. Both are contained within Nuit. The secret is that both must be brought together. For it is at dusk in the west where the principal movement of the Akba, of the old Ra, the great Ba, is seen as exhausted and is therefore in need of replenishment. This is achieved by merging the Akba again with the Khat, or the body of Osiris. For it is this that takes place deep within our subconscious nightside and is then iconographically glyphed through the Duat, or the things in the netherworld, and is detailed in the Book of Gates. For example, see my flesh of Ra. The Akba is therefore swallowed by Nuit in the west, glyphed as passing through the western gateway of the star goddess's mouth, and then after journeying down into the north, eventually as Kefra in the east arises, or indeed as we are reborn anew at sunrise, we thus exit through Nuit's vulva, and where the Mehen serpent bark is lifted up into the eastern horizon by Shu and Tefnut, that is, moisture and air, and thus we hopefully either wake up or indeed consciously return from our scrying praxis. Various processes can therefore be used to enable one to dislim, in which can aid one in scrying in Perank, at Keki and the Shettit. The Demotic Book of Thoth hints at the theory and practice of using the Mehen serpent bark, and as one wills and dislims, it can be transformed and manoeuvred through Ament into the Chamber of Darkness at Keki, and this is where one's magical exploration of the Shettit begins. For in this ancient traditional methodology, the scryer can enter from the western desert through a mountain pass and gateway, and this will lead to what is glyphed in the texts as the first hour of the night side. For the Duat is the home of the Neteru, Osiris, Anubis, Thoth, Horus, Hathor, and Mat, along with many other daimonia, energia, and dunamis. All of this is therefore detailed for you, and who, like the great Ba and Ak, mind soul of Ra, the sun god, travels in the Mehen through the Duat every night, and where he and his retinue, that is Ra, including Set in the first hour, will begin their battle against Apep, Apophis, the serpent of Isfet, or chaos. But note here, this is the good bit. And as you will have already guessed, we also travel through the Duatic subconscious every night, but also in that of our final journey to hopefully becoming that of a glorious star, Seba, in the company of Starry Nuit, travelling in the bark or the boat of millions of years. During the day, Ra will use a vessel called the Manjet, bringing life and heat to the earth as it moves from east to west, pure consciousness. Obviously, in scrying, we need an empty portal, and indeed, more importantly, an exit. However, in looking more closely at Kenneth Grant's and the Egyptian definition and use of the term ament, amentia, and where Grant notes that amen means the concealed one and ta means land or abode, Grant is correct in that amen, amun, amon, can mean the hidden one, and that ta does indeed mean earth. However, in hieroglyphics, these only represent the entrance to the hidden place, the shetet, or the beyond, and it is only the portal itself that is known as amenta, i.e. the west, and is thus always written as ament, or with the feminine amentet, which refers to she of the west, and is thus the gateway. Compare my analysis and association of the glyphs with the headdress, and the Aker lions symbolising the way by which one dislimbs through the desert and the mountains. Hence, it represents the horizon that one aims for. For further details, see my Flesh of Ra in the Chamber of Darkness. Throughout our discussion, I am in fact comparing the night side and scrying as a journey into the subconscious, as being glyphed as a journey into the Chamber of Darkness and the Shetet, and which includes the 12 hours of duatic sleep and finality of corporeal death. We're told that one must enter as Akti. The Netta, the Ba of Ra, enters through the western gateway as Akti, the text states. For this reason, we are also informed that the beginning is the horn of the west, the gate of the western horizon. The end is thick darkness. Question: why do we bother in entering the gate of the western horizon? Well, for the scryer initiate as Sonyu, we are told in the book of the Amduat that the reasons for dislimming through the gateway are to know the basils of the Duat, to know what is done there, to know their enlivening for Ra, to know the secret basils, to know what is in the hours and their neteru, to know what he calls them, to know the gates and the ways upon which the great God passes, to know the courses of the hours and their gods, to know the flourishing and the annihilated. At Keki, the Chamber of Darkness is therefore referred to as a wonderful limb of the netherworld, the Duat, and it is where the Akba travels through the 12 hours of the Duat every night, and where restoration and balance is completed by rejoining with the earth or body glyphed as Osiris, and by defeating Apep. For Apophis Apep is one aspect of the serpent and subconscious atavistic energy of chaos and the night side. Literally, our dark stuff in the Shetet, the beyond. As such, we know that Amenta reflects the western gateway, as in Grant's move zone, entries by way of dislimming through Dath, into the night side, the dream cells and tunnels of Set. And as Grant notes throughout his Typhonian trilogies and novellas, especially Against the Light, this is where the subject, or the scryer, experiences rooms, individuals, and corporeal objects slowly beginning to dislimb as the practitioner begins their scrying journey. The practitioner should now understand that when represented in hieroglyphs, we have to move 1 through the western desert, or Zemet, and 2, the western gateway, Ament. Then 3, one's Akba is then protected by the Mehen as you dislimb and sail through the Duat. Finally, 4, one begins to scry the Shetet, the beyond. All of this magical preparation and travelling can be linked to the practical and occult use of the hours of the day, corporeal compass points, magic circles and weapons, but also that of blood fetishes. Phenomenal objects help the scryer project along with the iconography and glyphs when used in more meditative procedures, nominally induced for exploration, communication with the various subjects, such as the entities that are found in the Shetet. for these can be studied before engaging with them in the Duat, that is by learning to visualize the iconography and glyphs to be used as sentient symbols, e.g. hieroglyphics. Scribal duties and the learning undertaken from the studying of the iconography, the atavisms, the neteru, the daimonia, are all extremely deep-rooted. These atavisms are depicted zoomorphically or theriomorphically, but more frequently they are represented in human or at least semi-anthropomorphic form, with human bodies and the heads of other animals, considered malevolent, but whose dunamis, whose powers, can be called and magically used by the scryer for magical protection. Thus, true magic, in its widest and most creative sense, is neither light nor dark, but indeed all is interconnected and linked through liminal or interstitial states. That is like a line or current that connects macro-micro through the mesocosm. That is you. The link that is used in ancient texts is that supplied to the magician seer, the Sonyu, through activating what we term the Ophidian current, that is, magic as glyphed as Heka, who is usually seen touching or activating the Mehen serpent's tail to stimulate the current and initial process of dislimbing, and it is this that also stimulates one visualization of the entire Mehen serpent bark. Compare the activation of the fire serpent or kundalini. It is this activation which links both corporeal phenomena and incorporeal noumena, especially as the Mehen is activated as a protective veil around the practitioner's akba. The journey will indeed bend both night-side and day-side consciousness, like linear and non-linear time, and whereby the process will be understood as cyclic. The terms dark magic and the dark arts both describe a category of esotericism that involves simply the interaction with things that are normally hidden, hence occult, or better, those things in the netherworld in Egyptian glyphed as the Duat, the things in the Duat. Unfortunately, these entities, atavisms, are mostly rejected by non-initiates and therefore denied of their own true nature and indeed connection to us as individuals. Nature itself, therefore, not only refers to the stuff going on around you, but also includes human nature along with those sometimes repressed thoughts. However, to acquire balance, we need to understand and accept some of those somewhat darker aspects which are rooted deep within our own being. For more information on this, check out my atavism talk on Black Lodge Publishing on the YouTube. When one has prepared all of the necessary materials, the entire praxis of engaging the current through the Mehen and then dislimbing, the practitioner will then become drawn into and then understand the entire process of cyclicity, including the necessary unity of the day side and night side, respectively. Thus, and depending on whether you are sleeping, scrying, or indeed one's corporeal body, your khat, is deceased, all of this involves an understanding of the life-giving powers invested in us from the akba, the mind-soul, and indeed the khat, the body, as it reflects further in our birth, life, death and rebirth, as it is glyphed and experienced through both our conscious and subconscious day-side and night-side phenomena and noumenal states. All of this will eventually lead to gnosis, or the reunification of one's akba as a seba, a glorious star, as one returns to the starry heavens of Nuit. This magical theosophy can therefore be traced back to that of our inbuilt ancient memory source, which is perfectly glyphed through the chaotic waters of Nun, Apophis and Atum, Zeptepi, first time Nehi or linear time, and the genesis of the cosmos, and where the mound of Tatenan and the earth Ta, and the original mound Benben, the pyramidion of fire, is reflected in the water of the Nile, and where, as the phoenix, the heron rises from Geb, as Had, the netter of the earth, is positioned at the centre of Nuit, as she continues her cycles round the heavens, and where our position lies between the macrocosm and the microcosm, as such, the mesocosm. So at dusk, the west, the principle of movement where your basal is mirrored by the old Ra, and who, exhausted, needs replenishment. This is glyphed by the merging of the Akba with the body of Osiris the cat in the 5th to the 6th hour of the Duat, deep within Nuit. The psychogeography is therefore represented by the great Ba of Ra being swallowed by Nuit as the star goddess at sunset, and then the mind soul is unified with the body, being reborn, transformed, fully refreshed through Nuit's vulva at sunrise in the east every morning, one hopes. However, and alternately, one can use the current and the tools for magical praxis and scrying the Shettit, and using a deep knowledge of the images, the iconography, and the sigils, the hieroglyphs, as detailed in the Book of Gates, or the Amduat, and those explored by the initiate Sonyu in the Book of Thoth. The knowledge gained by the student as Merak also prepares them for their final stellar transformation and unification of the Akba as a Seba shining star in Nuit and the boat of millions of years. Eventually, and after many aeons, reunification in Nun, or the One, can be achieved, that is, beyond Jet, Nehi, and even Zep Tepi first time. Thus, Kenneth Grant's use of the term Amentia Mentia is a term which is suited to that interstitial or liminal entry point that is for us the one that links dayside consciousness to that of the subconscious night side, or the Duat, by the art of dislimbing and indeed that of scrying. As the Ak, Naus, is bound through the Ba, Syuche, through the blood to Kat, the body or image, it can be reversed, e.g. catabasis and anabasis, as in an alchemical refluxive cyclicity through circulatoria, dissolutio, mortificatio, resurrectio, etc. There, in companionship with Ra, the Ak, the mind abided forever on this, quote, boat of millions of years. Yet, this brings me to my final observation. That is about the process and function of mummification. And however, as I hope you will understand, that this involves the magical transformation of the physical body, the Khat, into a mummy, and which itself becomes a ritual object or saha. For it is through the corporeal object that one can magically focus one's attention through the Akba, through the mind soul, and hopefully at death, one can escape from that of the physical net. Nonetheless, the mummy can become the interface par excellence for the transition and subsequent communication between the world of the living and indeed the world of the dead. It becomes the ultimate fetish. Mummification therefore involves the transformation of the physical body, the Khat, into a tselem, a magical image, and then the release of the Ak. The former becomes a ritual object, saha, as I said, and through which we can magically focus the attention of the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak, for they escape this physical net and can then scry. And thus the deceased, or indeed one's ancestors, can also be questioned about names and other various topics, along with the secret names of the gates, the regions, and other daimonia within the Duat. For in the later Ptolemaic period, we find that this magical knowledge had understandably evolved, and where we meet Hellenistic astrology, magic, and alchemy, regarded as more technical subjects, certainly different from the more philosophical and theoretical Hermetica. Our magical theoria also turns up in the Greco-Egyptian, such as the PGM and PDM, and which in the Western tradition will continue through the likes of the Gnostics, Neoplatonists, perhaps the Knights Templar, Kabbalists, Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, Freemasons, the Golden Dawn, the OTO-AA, and the OT, etc. All of these should be grateful for the roots that were provided and to what Grant had referred to as those dark dynasties, those of ancient Egypt. Many thanks for listening, and I hope you hit the like button, share and subscribe to our YouTube and Facebook Black Lodge publishing sites. If you have any questions, then please email me at bobplummer@yahoo.co.uk. Until next time, Nux Pan.